you are in for a treat.
Welcome to the Living in Fullness podcast with Naki.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another amazing episode of the Living in Fullness podcast. I am your lovely host, Naki Hlomayi Muteto, and I am excited about today's episode specifically because my guest is one you don't want to miss. But before we get into that, if you haven't gone to our website, please do go and browse and check it out. If you want to suggest a guest or even yourself, please do fill in the suggestion form and go and subscribe, like, and share on all our platforms. We're on YouTube, we're on Spotify, we're on Apple Podcasts, we're on all streaming platforms. So today our guest is one who is a seasoned chartered accountant. She's an entrepreneur. She is well vested in transformation, leadership, and you name it. She sits on so many influential boards. I've got with me Linda Maqoma. Hi.
Hi, Naki.
How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I am good. I'm good to have you here.
Lovely to be here.
Lovely to see you.
And it took some time for us to coordinate this.
I know.
With me being all over the show, but we are here now.
It's all of us. I've been all over the show, guys. I'm exhausted, but I'm excited. She's a breath of fresh air, so I'm excited about this episode.
Awesome.
But I feel I didn't do justice to your bio. But before we do the icebreakers, I want you to tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us who Linda is, and then we can do some icebreakers.
Okay, so a lot of people assume that I'm a chartered accountant. I did do CA training. I am an AGASA by designation. I did my honors at the University of Forte. I did my training through KPMG. I wrote board 1 and then board 2. I was like, this is a bit much, but signed off with KPMG. So I do have my articles. I've done a lot of work within the profession, but also very linked to a lot of the transformation agenda within the profession through ABASA, which has been a very big, labor of love for me over the past couple of years, starting from when I was at the University of Forte in my second year. And now I've just come out of being the president of the ABASA for 3 years. So I'm really kind of transitioning. So this is my first podcast really around moving from that space of being fully vested in this transformation agenda in the accounting sector to really focusing on my own, important things, family-wise, business-wise. I run my own company. I am the founding CEO of Nomatshawe Consulting Group. And a lot of the things that I'm very passionate about, which people have seen me do, are really housed in that space. So skills development is very important to me. Women empowerment of the marginalized in our country. A lot of things that speak to how do we become the solution to a lot of what is a challenge in the country. Because I think if we were all wired like that, number one, but also if our government would also create an environment that supports those that want to be part of the solution, I think we'd really get along, go far in terms of finding ways to mitigate a lot of what is happening in the country currently. So that's just a high level soundbite of who I am professionally, but more than anything, and what's very close to my heart is I am a mother to a little girl. Well, she's not so little anymore. She's 14. She's just moved to boarding school. She is just this amazing little human being who's transitioning as well this year, and it's just amazing to watch. So we both just figuring ourselves out in new spaces and owning what it is that our purpose is calling us to do. Yeah,
I love it. I can't help but ask, did you send your child to boarding school because you went to boarding school?
So, good question. So I went to boarding school from like grade 2. Yeah. So I always felt really bad. The thought of taking my child so early. Things are not the same as they were back in the day. Schools are not the same as they were. And also a lot of my career advancement has been in the Gauteng space. Having started out my articles in East London, and then I moved to financial services at KPMG in Joburg. But I couldn't take my daughter to Queenstown, which is where I did go, right? Because then I'd be far from her. And I just felt that I needed to be a hands-on parent. I'm a very hands-on parent. But I've dedicated a lot of her primary school journey. And I said, Danam, I think you're ready. And I think the past 2 months of her being there, I've seen such a transition. Simple things like, when I would go into her room and be like, you should be changing your linen now, right?
Yeah.
She's like, okay. Because she sleeps on top of the duvet. She calls me and she's like, Mommy, can you please get more like duvet covers and linen? Because I need to check. I'm like, huh? And she's like, no, I'm washing my shirts. I'm like, but there's a laundry. She's like, no, I prefer to wash them myself.
Okay.
Like, who is this?
All right.
So it's quite an interesting journey at the moment. I'll see how long it lasts. But one of the main things that I really thought the school would give her and going into boarding school, as far as I could remember, is that it gives you a sense of discipline. There's a routine. There are things that you need to get up and do. You're not going to be waiting for your parent to do them. And also the sisterhood. And it's so beautiful to see her making the friends that she's making, which I believe will be lifelong. So I'm happy for her.
I totally agree with you. I had to ask because I do not like boarding school.
Oh, yeah.
I went to boarding school and I was like, I don't know if my kids will go to boarding school.
Okay.
But it certainly does have pros. Like you're saying, there's a lot of things that I learned from boarding school that I wouldn't know. Friends that you make. And also because you're sort of confined to the same community, you then tend to have long-lasting friendships. But yeah, we're going to have some icebreakers. You ready?
Ready.
Yeah. So one thing about living in fullness is we love to believe that life is holistic, but also life is fun.
Yep.
So we always have some icebreakers to lighten things up. So the first question I have for you is, what is one thing we would never catch you doing?
Whoa. I don't know why skinny dipping came first. You'd never catch me do that. Yeah.
You're not about to risk your life.
In the ocean.
Yeah.
With no clothes. No.
But I mean, personally,
I'm like, no, don't explain it.
It's fine.
It's a no. It's a no.
Experiment.
And then when you get out and your clothes are not there, what happens? I've watched too many movies. I've watched too many
I actually
movies.
thought you'd be worried in the sense that maybe if there's a shark coming or something and then you have no clothes, then now you must run.
I thought about that. But when you're a public figure, it's like, who could just pop up out of nowhere? So no, never. I'm sure there's a better answer, but that's the one that came first.
Okay. Entrepreneurship or 9 to 5?
Entrepreneurship. Any day.
Any day.
Yeah.
Okay.
I love my flexibility. And I grew up around women who were very driven. And I think my memories of my childhood, I don't recall. My mom worked at some point, but later on in life we were in the farming space, and I think I've just been so influenced by an environment of entrepreneurship. It's very hard for me to see myself going back to 9 to 5.
Makes sense. And if you're to pick top 3 qualities for you that make a good friend?
Consistency, love, and non-judgment. Those are the 3 qualities.
Love it. That's amazing. I love non-judgment because I think a lot of people don't realize what actually judgment is or what it looks like. So I think for friendship, that's very important.
And it's hard to, hard to even be vulnerable with someone where you feel like they will judge you.
Exactly.
So I think those sorts of spaces require someone who's going to listen fully and really try and kind of put themselves in your shoes. I think a lot of judgment that comes from people is because you've never been in someone's shoes and you've never experienced something. You see things from your own lens.
Yes.
So non-judgment is very important in being a good friend. So you're able to listen. Yeah.
And that's something I've also had to learn through the podcast. Because when I hear some people's stories, I could listen and be like, what did you say you did? So I've learned. So when I think of having guests, right, on the podcast, one thing I always love to do is ask you about your childhood. It sounds like a cliche question, but it's always helped me to understand my guest, especially because I think our childhood shapes us in one way or the other. So what are aspects of your childhood that have shaped the Linda that we see today, the successful, amazing Linda we see today?
So my childhood was very driven by women that shaped the household in such a way that it created an environment for us to blossom. I grew up having my mom and my dad, and when my brother came along 9 years later, we had a nuclear family. And it gave me that sense of, family. Like, I want that, Don't judge me for not being married already. But yeah, non-judgment.
Non-judgment.
And later on, losing my mom when I was in grade 11 is a big one as well, because you have a pillar that's so important in your life. And I think that's where I started learning independence as well. Never mind the fact that my time growing up was in boarding school, which already gave me a sense of independence.
Yeah.
And I think I thank God for that, because maybe it was preparing me for the fact that I'd lose a very important parent later on in life, but early within my journey. And then my gran was also very close to me. My mom was very close to my gran. My gran became my guardian after my mom passed away. And then losing her 2 years later, that's another sort of thing. But those are two people, when I looked at them, like real big matriarchs and strong women who also made sure that the household was very protected. I saw my dad as like Superman, because my mom created that environment that he would look like this man that's strong and, available for us. And, I love my dad till he passed 2 years ago. And I didn't even know that was not even my real dad,
Oh.
So I only met my real biological parent when I was 25.
So at what point did you know? At 25?
Only when I was in second year varsity. I don't know. But that was the father that raised me.
Amazing.
And if you look at that and the timeline of that, it's because my mother cushioned a lot of what was happening and the realities, so that I would have the fullest life possible. And I, when I look back, and I'm glad you asked about me taking my daughter back to my old school.
Yeah.
When I made that decision, I'm like, that was a brilliant decision for me to also be able to make it 20 years down the line, which is 20 years after I was in matric from the school. So my parents made decisions that were really, I believe, were for my best interest. And I really think my mom was very pivotal in making sure that those things happened. And we had the best balanced life. And in the background, they were busy trying to make things work. And we would never see that. And the difficulties. I mean, I never remember needing anything or wanting anything growing up. But I don't doubt that it was my mom having to push really hard, that we'd never really need anything or want anything. Yeah.
That's incredible. I mean, also just listening to the fact that you didn't even realize that
No,
he wasn't your dad also speaks into how much of an amazing dad he was. Because don't you think if he's not a great father, you would certainly question. I mean, some people do have to question even their own biological
I didn't even call him dad growing up. We used to call him Bodi. And it never clicked in my mind that that's not my dad.
Oh, I see.
So it is really around how the environment.
Yeah.
So I think titles, I mean, maybe it even links to the fact that titles don't really matter. It's what the environment produces and manifests. And it then conditions you to see it in a way that is not confined to what you call it. So he was not dada, but he was my dad. Like if anyone were to walk me down the aisle, well, God is not going to give me that now, but that would have been him. Yeah.
That's incredible. So now, because you're saying they basically sort of gave you this cushion, right? Protected you from the realities of the world to some extent, and helped you to feel very safe and secure. What would you say is your relationship with failure, and how do you cope when it comes to adversity and failing?
So people who know me very well know that my favorite scripture is from Romans, around all things work together for good, for those who love the Lord and those who are called according to his purpose. So it's not been a scripture that has been, primary in my life till later on in life. To the point that when I buried my dad in 2023, I combined my mom and my dad's tombstones, and in the middle, I put that scripture. It's not about a failure thing. It's about when things don't go the way you think they're going to go, that you need to remind yourself that all things work together for good, and that all is important, because all means good or bad, but they work together for your good. If you're called, and the important thing is for us to also look at the context of the scripture, because we leave it at maybe the first part, but it's also about those who are called according to his purpose.
Love it.
You know? So my relationship with failure, I mean, growing up, I was a very diligent child. I did well in school, from junior school, high school. I cummed matric, did very well as an all-rounder, first team hockey, you know, public speaking, all these good things, you know, prefect, school prefect, hostel prefect.
You were doing all that.
All these things, right? And then you get to varsity and you get accepted for BCom accounting. And I think my second option was actuarial science or something like that. And my first experience of failure was failing accounting 2 in my second year. All other subjects being distinctions. And I don't think it really, I still had a sense of, but this is not that bad. Like I could go back and go do this thing, but I think my dad took it worse than I did. And you were just like, listen, you're either coming home, you're going to work, or like the options were not to stay in Joburg at Wits, right? And that's also how I transitioned into going to Forte, and I finished my studies working and paying for my fees, but also got the opportunity to finish through bursaries from DHET and KPMG. But even with that, CTA, I failed my first year of CTA. But in my mind, I've always had this thing like, this is happening for a reason. There's something that God wants me to see, right? Or experience. Because what I've learned along the way, and especially when you deal or experience very difficult things, is that empathy or experience drives empathy, if I can put it that way. If you've never experienced something, it's very hard to go and put yourself in someone else's shoes.
Absolutely, I agree.
And for me to have then also had to be a leader in a space where we are fighting for pass rates of young people that want to be in the accounting space, want to be in the CA journey, and the failure rate of Black candidates. And for you to have the posture to advocate for them to be given fair opportunities has to come from an experience.
Yeah.
I would not have been positioned well enough if I had not gone through my own failures and my own experience of the journey for me to be able to say, I'm coming from a point of experience. I'm not coming from a superficial point of watching it from the outside. When you have endured something, you have some sort of qualification to speak on it.
Yeah.
And stand on it and say, the journey is like this. And I've overcome that, but I believe that we could do better so that those that follow don't have to go through what we had to go through. Yeah. So that's my relationship with failure.
It's an incredible way of looking at things, because, you know, when I'm looking at people like yourselves that have done so well in their careers, it's very difficult to find someone who doesn't want other people to go through exactly what they went through, especially if they can find solutions because of what they've gone through. And the fact that I always say that your test is your testimony, right? Because whatever you've gone through, you now have the grace and the ability and the understanding to be able to help other people to go through it, right? So what was your first experience with rejection? It wasn't even supposed to be a question I was going to ask you, but I think I'm quite interested in knowing what your first experience with rejection was.
So this is rejection outside of failure.
Like where you actually felt like unwanted, unworthy, rejected.
You know, the most painful thing I get about that question is that my earliest recollection of that comes from family. And I don't know how many people can relate. I'm sure a lot of people can relate with that. I mean, we've just seen the whole incident with Uprenda, you know, and how she was home and her relationship with her mother and things like that. Well, I don't have that experience, but when you don't have your primary parent, you are then exposed to people who are your parents' siblings, and they have their own lives. And you don't really feel like you are 100% prioritized or wanted. You always feel like a burden. And if I can put it that way. So I've journeyed all my life from the time I lost my mom in 2004, and I was in grade 11 at the time, where you always very conscious of not being a burden to someone else, because you know that if your parent was there, would have been an easy thing. I mean, by the time I had my daughter at 25, and I mean, I look at a lot of people who have kids and they are working and all of that. But if you ever need to go drop your child off somewhere, you think of your family first. You think of your mom naturally. And I've never had that. So I think my earliest, sort of experience with that or rejection is feeling like, yes, someone is there, but they're not fully there. And then you're just like, let me just figure this out another way. But that drives a lot of independence. A lot of you having to think of the best way for you and for your child. And it drives you to also not be complacent. And that maybe I should take that as a good thing, but we always want people to also not feel like they're alone. But unfortunately, in my journey, you tend to feel like you're alone and you have to just figure things out yourself, because it's not 100% the way that it would have been if you had the parents that God had given you, Yeah.
I totally agree with you. And I think you also don't know to what extent you should request for things, right?
Exactly.
Because you don't know if it's starting to seem like you're asking for too much. So it becomes a little bit tough. But I love the fact that you're saying it also taught you to be independent. And I think it's really gotten you to where you're at now, where you know exactly this is what life is. This is how resilient. I think you're very resilient.
Thank you.
I think you
But we don't like the word resilient in this country.
I know. I know, but I think you're a very resilient person, and resilient it's not always associated with negativity. I think it's just the fact that life itself is not linear, right? Life fluctuates. A lot of things happen, but it's the ability to come out of a dip. And even when you go back again, it's ability to know and learn from the previous one how to come out of it. Absolutely. And I think you've got that. So in your career, what would you say are some of the attributes that you've had that have helped you to be where you're at today?
First one that comes to mind as a young Black woman is confidence. And I think we see it a lot of times where women in spaces where it's time to speak up, we tend to hold back. And I don't think I've had that problem. So I think confidence is very important. Another one that everybody knows is very close to my heart is respect. I found that respect has opened so many doors in my career that disrespect would have probably closed, and, having had to pause my career journey at some point and then going back into the academic space and into article space, being older than the pack. You land up there having people who are your seniors who are actually younger than you, right? But the principle of that is that you still have to have the respect within the context of where you are. You don't come and pull your weight because you are older in age, but you need to appreciate the structure and the protocol and the discipline that is required in that particular space. And sometimes I remember my first job, actually, I used to call my boss dad all the time, and everyone was like, why do you call him that? But I was the one given the company car and like all these perks and I'm like, it's not that it's something I deliberately was trying to get, but I think there's all respect has a way of disarming people in a way.
I agree.
So that's number 2, confidence, respect. And I think COVID has taught us a lot of empathy in the way we lead and do things. And I guess with empathy comes a lot of kindness in the way that we approach things and people, appreciating that wherever you're going to be dealing with people. So that is the third one for me, and really around empathy. And I think my journey has taught me a lot of things where don't assume that people are okay, and that people see things the way you see them. And you have to really work extra hard as a leader to be open-minded. And you know, sometimes you can have people come at you very aggressively, and you have to sometimes be silent. And that silence is not because of weakness. It's because you realize that there's something deeper here. And if you were to retaliate, it could actually turn this thing in a way that you don't want it to be.
Yeah.
And you have to then have some sort of restraint to appreciate the context of working with people and the different backgrounds. And I think confidence, respect, and empathy become my three traits.
And I think it ties into also looking at the bigger picture, right?
Absolutely.
Because sometimes we're so short-sighted, we're just looking at, oh, these people are treating me this way. But I think if you know your end goal, there's certain things you can take. And
you can let it go.
Like, you can let it go because you're like, I know where I'm going. I know what my plan actually is. And I think when you speak about respecting people that are younger than you, that you're reporting to, I think that's a tricky one.
It's tricky.
I think that's a tricky one because one, it takes a lot of humility. But it also takes the person you're reporting to who is younger to be mature.
Absolutely.
Because at times they can try to show power. They can try to bring you down. So, I mean, I'm wondering then, how do you deal with that? Because I think it's happening quite a lot now. There are younger people that are being promoted quite quickly. So they're rising quite quickly. And you find older people actually reporting to them. And they don't know how to handle this power thing. And then this person at the bottom feels like, I'm not going to respect you. You're too young. Yeah. So how do you deal with that? How do you find the balance?
Naki, I feel like you have a story to tell on this. This is deep. You know, life will teach you that things turn somewhere down the line. But also in the space, you being respectful doesn't stop you from having the right relationships at a higher level. And from that, those relationships can actually answer for you without you saying anything. So for instance, in my time, I may have been, you know, older than the pack and at a certain level, but I had good relations with my partners and the CEO and head of the division and things like that, because where I was able to also be confident in that space. So you being respectful here doesn't take away from your ability to open doors for yourself at the level that you actually are at.
Love it.
So once you understand, like how you were saying, the end goal and the bigger picture, you're not too worried about what this junior is going to say, you know, because you realize that there's an ecosystem that exists and you know where you're going within this ecosystem. And then you just know how to find a way to navigate through it.
Oof, guys, I want this episode to be long. So, you know, another thing that's kind of interesting about you is how you transitioned from corporate to entrepreneurship, right? Yeah. And I've been sitting on that idea for a very long time. But one thing about entrepreneurship that I think we can't leave this episode without speaking about is how it's sometimes difficult to say no. I think especially when you're starting, because I think it's, for lack of a better word, you become a little bit greedy. Yeah. Because you don't want to turn down opportunities because you're not sure if that's the one that you need to actually break through. So how do you manage to say no?
Very good questions. Almost like you knew what I was thinking about last night. So there's a post I'm probably going to put out within the next week, but it really talks about when you're going to go into a new journey, you need to map it to your purpose. And you also need to be able to know how you're going to measure your impact. And a lot of things, when you're very clear about your purpose, your vision, and your values, you then have the tools to be able to say, but this does not align to where I want to be in the long run. It may look good and lucrative now. And I won't lie. I mean, I've got a client now, which I won't mention by name, and started doing work, and then they now being difficult about payments, and then it becomes very political and all of these things. And I went to my partners and I said, I would rather protect our reputation as a brand. Say, if they are wanting to use someone else, let them do that. Because I believe that this brand has so much more to do than just something like this. So while sometimes you can discover those things while you are trying to help, and you realize like, oops, there's more to this. When you then know what it is you want to do with this vehicle, which is yourself and your brand, which encompasses all these values and this purpose, you are able to reflect and be like, is this mapped to where I want to go? And how is it going to affect where I want to go? And you should be able to say, it's not easy, right?
It's not.
It's not. And especially if it's about sustainability of a business and all of that. And I think that's why the work of advocacy groups around SMMEs and people who are starting out their own businesses are saying, pay people on time, do things in the right way so that people don't have to be in these situations, right? But also creating environments, especially in the public sector, that do not make us feel like, we now must sell our souls to get bread on the table. Can things be done in a professional manner throughout the ecosystem? And we have a long way to go with that. I won't even lie, but I'm really hoping this country will take a turn. And for me, it seems so easy, because if we're saying we have an unemployment rate, we need to do something about our economy, and we're saying creating job opportunities is at the center of this thing, then why are we not supporting those who are trying to create jobs, trying to scale those jobs so that you are able to absorb those that are unemployed? Let's hope and pray that there'll be a shift.
I love it. I was actually going to ask you, because you worked for Saiga, right?
Saiga, yes.
And I was like, how are you able to remain ethical in public sector? Because I think it's a little bit of a tricky one. So the
nice thing about Saiga is that I sit on the Global Enterprise Development Committee, which advises on a lot of how you grow the membership, you support the membership, you help it be relevant for the space that it is in. And also I partner with them from a consultancy perspective. But Saiga as an entity in itself is not that environment yet. If I had chosen, so for example, I had the choice between doing my articles at KPMG or AGSA. I was already signed with KPMG, and AGSA in the Eastern Cape wanted to buy me out, and I said no.
I hear you.
And why I said no is a story for another day, but I still later on in life advocate for the AGSA, because I really feel that we do need strong professionals in the accounting space, auditing space in our country. And the AGSA is the biggest vehicle that's going to pump that. So big supporter of the AGSA.
Amazing. How do you rest? You do a lot of things. How do you find balance? How do you rest? So anyone who looks at you and wants to be you, they also need to know that you take a break. How do you rest?
I sleep. I try and sleep. And but I always write in my text. Sometimes I'll write on my status like, I need a holiday from a holiday. Then people are like, but you just were abroad somewhere. That and I'm like, sense. But you don't get it. Like, I just need my own holiday. It's very difficult. But I think when I cannot find rest, I try to find peace. So talking to my daughter gives me a lot of peace, and she not that she's intentionally doing it, but listening to how she's growing, and that a lot of the decisions I'm making in my career and where I'm not finding rest is actually benefiting her in some way. That gives me peace. So until I find the space to rest, which is just like, can you just give me an hour extra to sleep in the morning? I'm also very deliberate about the times that I'm available. If you call me at 8 o'clock in the morning, you're not going to find me, because I will not have a meeting before 9 o'clock, because I'm also trying to make that time that I rest. And after a certain time, I've created those boundaries that I'm not going to address certain things, because I also need that time just to rest and look at my own things. Because I think people have been very accustomed to me being fully available for a lot of things at any time. And I had to put boundaries up for that. So my rest comes from that. Firstly, the boundaries, so that I know that I'm creating the time to be able to rest, but also if I'm not going to be able to rest, but at least find peace. And do the things that I believe are very important for me.
I love how you actually placed this, because it's a very delicate balance, right? You still want to grow professionally, but there's also the aspect where you're saying, I want to be a present mom. I want to have rest. I want to travel, but your professional life also needs to keep going. But I think it's finding that element of peace. And for me, when I'm working hard and I'm getting paid, I'm at peace.
Right? So you see how the peace thing is a very good alternative.
I like it. I have a different answer now. But now in closing, because I know we've run out of time, to someone who wants to, who looks up to you, because you also do have a lot of people that look up to you, what's one advice? I don't want to say advice you'd give to your younger self, but even to an adult, right? They've probably felt their entire life, they're now trying to get out of it. What advice would you give to someone in terms of just life in general, but more so professional growth?
Trust your instincts. Trust your gut. It's humbling to know that there are people that look up to me or look up to any of us, right? There are people I look up to. But what I found along the way is that no one is perfect. And as an individual, you must find it in yourself to understand who you are. And going back to what I said earlier around your purpose and your values. And your gut speaks to you. And sometimes we are so consumed around what is in our faces, and social media is very big on that, right? And lifestyles, and this one is doing this. And you forget to listen to the voice that is inside you. Our journeys are unique. And what I would say to any young person or someone, my younger self, trust yourself.
I love it. Yeah. That's amazing. I can't add or subtract. On that note, we have come to the end of our episode. Where do people find you?
Social media, I am Linda Maqoma on all social media platforms, LinkedIn, Instagram, which is private, Facebook, and my company as well, Nomatshawe Consulting, is also on LinkedIn, on Instagram, on Facebook, and I'm available, and we have a website. Check us out. And if you want to do impact work and you need a consultant to come in and do that for your company, give us a call. Available.
Awesome. And we will put all that in the description box to make it easier for you. Please don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. I can't wait for your comments. And please do contact Linda if you do need help with any of the things that she's mentioned now. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Until next time.